I'm going to call this meeting to order. Good evening and welcome. Tonight is Monday, February 4th. This is our instructional committee meeting. Our first order of business is to accept our minutes dated January 7th, 2019. Are there any corrections? Seeing none, let's start with Mr. Votto.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll abstain.
Yes.
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 And yes, minutes are approved. Okay, moving forward, item 3 on our agenda, curriculum and possible consensus. We're going to start with the anchor titles for high school ELA curriculum. Who's doing those?
Hi, Carrie Laudadio, English Language Arts Curriculum Coordinator. I have 2 titles that we have actually currently own copies of at our high schools and have discussed in past curriculum committees, but do not have currently in our curriculum on the anchor book list. So I'm bringing them tonight so that we can add them hopefully to for grade 9. We have Ordinary People by Judith Guest, which is a story about a family that experiences a variety of different circumstances, life circumstances, and connects with 2 of our grade 9 units in Choice and Consequences is one of our units, and Search for Identity. So the way our anchor book list is structured, the teachers can select books from it to use in any of the units that they seem fit to the theme. And then should I do both together, or did you want to? Okay, and then in grade 11, we have American Literature, and the title proposed for edition is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, which is a science fiction psychological genre, and it ties in with the theme of the American dream, whereas the main character never quite achieves the American dream. So those are the 2 titles.
Any questions? Ms. Raccio?
Hi, Kara.
Hi.
Ordinary People, and having that book, is there a reason that that was chosen for 9th grade?
So it fits best with the 9th grade units, themes of the units in 9th grade. I mean, it's a book that we own, and we have teachers who have connections with those 2 particular units on Search for Identity or Choice and Consequences. Doesn't really fit with the other units in the other grade levels, so that's where it seemed like a good fit to use it.
I'm just concerned that with the content of the book and the topics, mental illness, suicide, some of the things that are in there, as we see the 8th graders move into 9th grade, a lot of the 9th grade teachers, especially in the early units, units 1, unit 2, they don't necessarily know the 8th graders yet. That relationship and rapport isn't built. And these can be heavy topics to be teaching to a class that you really don't know, and the students don't necessarily have a connection within the school. So, and I know there was a couple years ago, we had the same concern about some of the summer readings, the book list of the summer list for rising 8th grader or rising 9th graders. They're not really in the school yet, and some of the topics just seemed a little intense for that. Does that make sense to
Yeah,
you?
that's fair enough. I mean, the teachers, there's a lot of tough topics in a lot of our books, but fair enough, good point. Yep.
Ms. Purcell?
The topic of suicide is covered in health in 10th grade. You know, they have a whole unit dealing with that kind of thing. So I don't know if that would be something that would kind of connect better at that level.
Okay. I could definitely bring that back to management team and have us review that particular title.
Yes.
We also have, I can't think of the term right now. Every October, there's a week of,
Red ribbon?
when you talk about the blue ribbon, which is.
Red ribbon.
Red ribbon. Don't get overseas. And I know all grades do that, and they do something, and I know the word suicide does come up as well as a few other things. So I mean, it's not that they're coming into this with no idea of what that's like and the problems that surround that,
Right.
what causes it. So
Right.
I just wanted to make that, mention that there is some prior knowledge and understanding of what that's all about.
There is, and I mean,
If it's done correctly.
right. Well, and that's just the thing. I mean, our teachers there's a lot of variety in the books that are being taught in all of the grades, and they bring not only the literary skills that go with teaching the books, but also the content piece.
I don't know the anchor list by heart, but what are the other 9th grade books that go with that? Like if a parent chose to opt out of this book,
Yep.
what are the other ones that they could choose?
It's a very long list.
Okay.
So I could definitely have it provided to you so that you could see. There
are
a good
options.
25
There
titles
are
on the
lots
list.
of options that
Lots
go
of
along with that
options.
unit.
Yep, lots of options on the grade 9 list.
Anybody else? Are we ready to take consensus? Mr. Votto?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd like it moved to 10th grade to align with the health and wellness curriculum.
I agree. 10th grade.
Yes.
Yes.
10th grade.
So that does not go through, correct?
I don't know.
1, 2, that's 4 of us. We need 5 for a consensus.
So it doesn't go into 9th grade. It doesn't mean it goes into 10th grade.
No, it would have to go come back.
Right.
So both titles or just that
was-
one?
No.
That was ordinary people.
Okay.
Yeah, just ordinary people.
Ordinary people.
That's,
Let's
Did
take
everybody
consent.
think that? That it was just ordinary people?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yes.
Roy?
Can we just separate it and do Slaughterhouse 5 now?
Sure.
Let's take consensus on Slaughterhouse 5, Mr. Votto.
You know, I didn't hear her discuss that one.
That was the
she
Kurt
didn't.
Vonnegut.
She hasn't yet,
Oh.
actually.
So should we have her discuss that?
Well, that would be
Yes.
nice.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Slaughterhouse 5 is, it's an anti-war novel. It takes place during World War II. The main character is, it connects with our American literature curriculum in grade 11 because the main character never quite achieves the American dream. And it's kind of time travel. It's a sort of a psychological sci-fi genre.
Okay.
Any other questions? Slaughterhouse 5? We'll start with Mr. Votto.
Yes.
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 Okay,
Okay.
so that one passes.
Thank you.
So,
So if-
you know, can I, oh,
Go ahead.
well, I honestly, I've never seen this happen before, so I don't even know what this means. I guess I'm looking to get educated. What are next steps for you guys? I don't know what to tell you.
So because the board did not reach consensus, it would not go on the list of books for those units. And therefore, Carrie would need to go back to her management team and either discuss the incorporation of it going into grade 10, as you all discussed, or, you know, as it is now, it's not on the list of books to be chosen to go along with the 9th grade units. High school is redoing and rewriting their curriculum next year, so you'll be brought new curriculum units, et cetera. But those are kind of where the options are at this point. Slaughterhouse 5 will be added to the anchor text list for the units in grade 11.
Yeah, got it.
So teachers will have that option to choose from, but ordinary people will not be anywhere in the units at this point unless the management team, through their discussions, decides to try again at a different
Got it.
grade level or otherwise. And the board would need to
Got it.
rediscuss and retake consensus at that point.
Ms. Castelli?
So I just want to clarify, Tammy, your comment, you felt it would be too early, not to have it in the first term or second term. What about the later part of the year in grade 9?
It's my understanding that the way the curriculum is written, they don't have to do, it's not necessarily taught unit 1, 2, 3, 4. You could do 4, 2, 1, 3. So it's assigning it to a unit, like unit 4, doesn't mean it would be taught in the later part of the year. And my concern isn't about the content of the book. It's being taught to students that we don't really know if there's an impact or a family situation that might.
But there's tons of books that could be the case with.
Absolutely.
agree.
But as a 9th grade incoming 8th grade student, that's where my concern is.
So you
if we
wouldn't want it
assigned
taught
it
at the
with-
beginning of the year, but,
I wouldn't want it taught in the beginning of the year, but Kathy, to say that it could be taught in Unit 3 or 4 doesn't mean it wouldn't be taught in the beginning of the year. That's my point.
No, I understand what you're saying. But I'm just saying, couldn't we put parameters around it that you have to, not to teach it in the first part of the year? Whatever unit you're working with. I don't know. Just some more for the management team to discuss.
Absolutely.
Ms. Purcell?
This is just logistical. Do you like have just so many sets of books and that's why the units are taught at different times of the year?
Not necessarily. Sometimes it's the progression of the themes that teachers prefer to teach them at different times. Sometimes it is the availability of the books.
Okay.
I will just throw out in grade 10 we do world literature. I don't think this particular book will fit the curriculum in grade 10. But you're right, Tammy, that the units can be taught in any order, so it would have to be, noted somewhere if that was the case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving forward, item B, the Lyman Hall and Sheehan High School trip to Sydney and Melbourne, Australia from July 22nd to August 2nd.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. So I'm actually bummed that Dr. Menzo isn't here tonight because he's a major catalyst of this exchange, and this is really exciting. We're actually very excited tonight to put forward 2 exchanges to 2 countries that cater to different cohorts of students for whom we've never really had an immersive, intercultural, or language experience. So the trip to Sydney, Melbourne, Bendigo is a reciprocal exchange where our students will travel this July to Australia, and the Australian students will travel at some point next school year, later to be determined. So we've been thinking November or March as possible times. And this entire exchange is really rooted in 2 major initiatives of the district to push forward student proficiency, intercultural competence, and design thinking. So these 2 really get married in this exchange. And it will be a very small select group of students who have a real interest in exploring design thinking and global competency, and the 2 will come together if you kind of read onto the page of expected outcomes. So the whole goal here is that through the design thinking process, which the Australian students and our students will really dig into, and Swinburne University on kind of the second leg of their trip in Australia, they'll learn the design thinking process, and then they'll use that lens to select an area of global focus to dig a little bit into further, an action service research project. And before our students leave Australia, they and their counterparts will have developed kind of a plan from there that will need to be approved, that will need to be approved by the educators and dignitaries on both sides of the pond. And then our students will come home and they'll work with their counterparts on whatever it is that they define as an area of global service learning. And then when the Australian students come here, the goal will be to kind of have it come full circle, and we will develop a way for that learning to be shared when the Australian students come here next school year. There's a little bit of sightseeing built in, so our group will fly from either Bradley or JFK. We're thinking probably JFK due to cost. JFK to Minneapolis to LA to Sydney, and they'll spend a few days in Sydney to adjust to the time change and do some sightseeing there, and then they'll fly to Melbourne, and that's where they'll meet their host families and travel out to Bendigo to Girton Grammar School. And grammar school in the Australian sense is a K-12 school, so Girton Grammar School isn't just younger students. And we'll really be looking to recruit sophomores and juniors at both of the high schools who have an interest in the design thinking process and in achieving the Certificate of Global Competency. Kathy.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Castelli.
Just a question with regard to the host families. Are the kids staying, is it a 1 kid to 1 family or a couple kids to 1 family? How's that work?
The goal is 1-to-1, and just like our other exchange programs, precedence will be given to students who want to participate in both parts of that reciprocity. So as we are fielding the applications, Students who are willing to host and travel will be given precedence, but it's a one-to-one exchange.
Okay, so I'm going to touch on a very sensitive topic. We hear in the news all the time now. What kind of education information are we giving our kids up front as far as reporting any kind of inappropriate situations they find themselves in? I know we vet these families, but you can never be 100% sure.
Sure. And we have our process that we've established as a board of the reference check procedure. So our students and their students, and the same will be true when we speak about the Italian exchange in a moment. When you apply, you have to give the names of 2 people who aren't related to you who have been to your home in the last year. And the questions are very granular that we ask those people. And Mrs. Bauer and myself have been part of that vetting process on this end. We also make sure that we receive the documentation on the other end, you know, and then it's not just a, yeah, we did it sort of rubber stamp. We've also been in the situation, I mean, we are there, feet on the ground, in the same community as these students while we're there. And we have had the situation before where we've had to change a student midstream. And so another question on the application for both parties is, in case of an emergency, would you be willing to host another student? And so we always kind of have in our pocket male and female, other hosts, and we have had to make switches. And it's never intended to be an interrogative process. It's just if you're feeling a level of uncomfortability and it's warranted. And so actually on the Wallingford end, when the Argentinians were here last, we had to make a change about midway through. And so we try to always have pieces in place where that can be pretty seamless and say to a family, if you check this box, this is what this means, right? We may be calling you at 10 o'clock one night saying, we have to bring somebody over, or we would always foot the bill if someone needed to stay in a hotel for a night or something like that. But we have, you know, unfortunately, because it meant a sever in the relationship, but fortunately for experience, we have had to move students to meet their level of comfort.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. That was my question also. Ms. McKay?
Yeah, so I know it's to be determined how many students, but I see 6 is that your cap, or
Well,
would you?
Dr. Menzo would like this group to be quite small. I think just because then of the level of interaction they'll be able to have at Swinburne University, which is a school that's renowned for its design thinking program. And if we had 6 Australian students and 6 Wallingford students, the level of interaction they could have as such a small group would be very rich.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd be averse to taking up to 12, but the intent is for this group to stay small.
And do we try to keep a balance between the 2 high schools? I mean, obviously, there's got to be a desire, and if there happens to be a greater desire at one high school over the other, but what do you do in a circumstance where, do you try to keep it equal between the 2 high schools?
We do
or
try to keep it
what's
equal.
the vetting process
And-
for students?
There's a student application.
Right, I saw that, and.
But
yeah.
we are actually going to put it in the hands of Swinburne University to select the students
Oh,
that will
okay.
be coming. But keeping in mind that we have students from 2 different high schools, and so kind of
Yeah,
remembering that in the selection process is key.
so they'll actually select our if there's in excess of, say,
Yes.
6.
The first
Well-
year that we did the global partnership with China,
Right,
we had 38 student applicants, and we were looking to take 20. And so Junior Achievement selected those students, very much keeping in mind that they came from 2 different high schools.
right, I
And they
remember
ended up
that.
choosing 10 and 10.
Yeah.
So we're
Yep,
anticipating the same with Swinburne. Put it in their hands,
right.
the selection process, but keep in mind that the students hail
Makes
from 2
sense.
different schools.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just would say, for the number of days, I thought the pricing was pretty affordable. I mean, I understood it's still $2,000, but considering what you're doing, I think it's a pretty affordable opportunity for our students.
It is.
I just wanted to make
when
that
you
point.
add in that homestay piece,
Mm-hmm.
you do save money there.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But doing ground transportation from the airport and ground
Sure.
transportation from Melbourne to Bendigo. And there are a lot of ways that that we're able to have really wonderful, rich experiences without it costing $3,500. Yeah.
Flight from Sydney
Yeah.
to Melbourne. to
And
that.
Judy Gallagher.
Yeah, it did, yeah,
That was fun.
yeah. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Okay, let's start with Mr. Votto.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the next item is our potential exchange between Wallingford Public Schools and Fano, Italy. Mr. Votto, you've been asking for this one for a while, so no pressure, but, you know.
How can I go with you?
Are you housing anyone?
Yeah, really.
This will be a little bit more of a traditional exchange, meaning that, I guess more similar to our Argentinian and German exchanges, where the focus is dually on language acquisition and using the language in the real world, and also on intercultural competence. So this exchange will be ideally open to students at both high schools studying Italian and students at Lyman Hall studying Latin. This is something we've been looking forward to for a very long time, an opportunity for the students that study both of those languages to have a real world experience. And with that said, you know, knowing that Latin is very different from Italian, Mrs. Bauer has worked very hard, and we will continue to work to make sure that this is something that's mutually rewarding for our students that study both languages. This will be a reciprocal homestay with the students from Fano coming to visit us in November, and we will travel there over our yet to be determined April break next year, with a mix of days spent in school with the hosts and days spent on one-day excursions or a couple-day excursions to Florence.
One big one to Florence and one smaller one to Urbino.
And students that are participating in this program won't be mandated to complete the Certificate of Global Engagement, but it will be strongly encouraged. And this is really kind of a really easy way to start off in pursuit of that award, where students could take this opportunity to research something, to make the world a better place while they are there. And so we've been brainstorming about ways to work with this sister school on enabling our students while they are there to be able to achieve the certificate if they would like to. The other really nice thing about this school in particular is that they also have an exchange with Norwich Free Academy in Connecticut. So we are entering hopefully into a partnership where they are a school who wants to have a relationship every year, and NFA and Wallingford is a school, or districts that would like to have a relationship every other year. So it will all really work together, but Laura has been in contact with the teacher at NFA who has participated multiple times with this group. So we feel very confident about their understanding of all the pieces that go into really the litigiousness that goes into a partnership with an American school that other countries don't really demand that level of thoroughness or litigiousness or whatever the word is. So we're excited about that. They've hosted an American school before, they understand the process. Do you want to share anything else, Laura?
I think you covered it. Any questions? I'm Laura
Questions?
Bauer. I teach at Lyman Hall High School.
I have a question.
Questions?
Just a quick question. So we're using for the Australian trip a 3-to-1 chaperone student ratio versus 6-to-1 on the Italian. Any reason? for
So
the
6-to-1 is the district policy.
difference?
In trying to keep the Australian group so small to a group of 6, there's also the district policy that in any international trip, 2 adults have to travel regardless
Right.
of the number of students.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where the discrepancy is coming in. So the ratio for Australia right now looks to be 3-to-1, where with Italy, we're going to keep it more, ideally 18 students, 3 chaperones. So they're both kind of in their own way matching different district policies.
Are there opportunities for fundraising to offset the cost for kids who can't afford it?
Mm-hmm.
We're hoping to. I have to say, this is the first time I'm ever doing this, so it's new to me too. but I was a part of the Argentina trip, so I saw what went on with the, with the vetting of the families and the fundraising. And Ms. Verna is helping me along too. She's from the area. I don't know, I'm not familiar with the specific area of the Marche. I've been to Italy countless times, and I lived in Italy, but it was always further south. So this summer, I'm actually going to do a dry run of this program because I'm that kind of crazy Italian mother who needs to know exactly where I'm going, and if I'm bringing your children with me, I need to know where we're going. So, and they are offering a week-long seminar in the town over for teachers of Italian. So I'm going to kill two birds with one stone and just take care of this, because I need to meet the people, I need to know where I'm going. And yes, fundraising, yes, I'm hoping to get, anybody who is familiar with the fundraiser, please contact me at Lyman Hall. Ms. Verna is willing to help. We spoke to some people today who had some great ideas. So yes, I'm hoping to.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's start with Mr. Votto.
Yes.
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 They're both good ideas.
Okay for Italy.
Hi, Liz Verna, 26 Mapleview Road. I just wanted to comment about all the hard work that Ms. Bauer has done in creating this program. I was involved with her a little bit. It's a absolutely wonderful region of Italy. The town is small, and the kids are really going to get a true Italian experience versus being involved in a program that might be in a larger city. But the time and effort that she has spent has been amazing. So she truly needs to be congratulated. She went above and beyond her duties as a language teacher at Lyman Hall. So thank you for giving this opportunity to my daughter and the other citizens of Wallingford.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, revised social studies graduation standards and performance indicators. Mr. Francesi?
Good evening, folks.
Good evening.
The social studies performance indicators and standards have been under review off and on for about a year and a half or more. The standards themselves have not changed at all. Most of the indicators did not change, but there was some work, especially at the elementary level. Last year I had a group of teachers I was working with rewriting curriculum. The elementary social studies had been very old and had not been addressed in quite a while. So I got them to help me go through and rewrite some of that stuff. So I don't know if you have questions or...
1 through 5, K through 5?
You do not have the grade 4, as I jokingly told Ms. Vlack when I walked in. They're in a secure, undisclosed location, and will be shared with you next month when I get a couple of problems straightened out.
Questions or comments?
On K5, no.
Well,
well, are
the
we on the-
indicators, you're approving K-12.
I was gonna say, before we get to those units, I think that
I'm
we,
sorry, gotcha.
yep, I think we wanna just start with the graduation standards and performance indicators.
My question is, on the grades 6 and 7, are we following, it's been a while since we changed this. I remember
Connecticut
sixth
State
grade-
frameworks.
It's the Connecticut State frameworks. They haven't been updated in a few years, though. Is that correct, or are they looking to do that again?
They were updated, I want to say 5, 6 years ago. I can't exactly remember. Frankly, I was not working with social studies stuff when it happened. The middle school curriculum should get revised sometime in the next few years. I don't have the document in front of me. I don't remember exactly when I've got it scheduled, but I know that we need to look at that a little bit. Currently, the way it's set up, it's basically 6th and 7th grade are a geography course that spans both grades, Western and Eastern hemispheres. And then the 8th grade is one of 3 years that are mandated to address U.S. history.
Right. I mean,
That, I don't think changes at all.
no, I hope not. Have you heard any, I've been trying to find out on the state level if the 6th and 7th grade is gonna stay that way with that 2-year spread with the geography. See, I'm a firm believer in the 6th grade used to be world history. I mean, kids don't hear about medieval times till they get into middle of high school. And I didn't like when they did that back then. They changed
No, I
it.
understand. I mean, I don't have it memorized, I'm not gonna lie to you. There is certainly information in the Connecticut State frameworks. I've got them linked in here. I could look them up in a heartbeat at some point for you if you want and share that with you. I cannot claim to have memorized what's required for each grade level at this
Well, I guess
point.
my question is, have you gotten any feedback from Hartford saying that they're going to be changing?
I don't think
For the
there's
social
anything, I don't think there's anything radically in the offing right now because the frameworks are not all that old. I don't think that there's any movement to change them right now.
Yeah. I'm part of that National Social Studies group. I'm trying to get them to think about it, but, okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Are we set to approve the graduation standards and performance indicators? Everybody okay with that? Mr. Votto, start with you.
Yes.
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 Okay, so let's move to our units for K through 5, 1, 2, and 3, minus grade 4.
Can I just add one thing? That I did look up the curriculum review cycle. Middle school is slated to begin their revisions and rewrite next year.
Next year.
Yeah, 1920.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Purcell.
Just a quick question on, a lot of the units say like 3 weeks or 15 days or whatever, but
Right.
does it say how many minutes or how long those lessons are?
I believe that there is information in there there's a section I added called Curricular Design, which I think includes that. If it doesn't, I can put it in there. It's generally understood that the lower grades of the primary is about 30 minutes, and the 3rd, 4th, and 5th is 45 minutes at a lesson, which is fairly standard. It also is designed pretty explicitly to alternate with science instruction, because math literacy and language literacy eat up a lot of time, justifiably. So there's a need to kind of balance things out. Actually, as a side note, on the 15th, we've got a full-day PD, and I'm actually sharing the teachers in my time with Kate O'Donnell, and she's got half a day with them, and I've got half a day.
So typically in an elementary schedule, they'll have a block of time, 45 minutes, that alternates between social studies and science and health. And usually what they do is they'll take a period of time where they might do social studies for several weeks at a clip, and then they'll go into a science unit. Because if you're starting a science unit in particular and you have materials that are out, you're not going to want to,
Right.
put them away and take them out and reset up every other day. So generally, what the teachers will do is alternate between social studies every day for a couple of weeks to complete a unit, and then they'll do a science unit. Then they'll go back to social studies, and then they go to science. So, at the kindergarten, first grade level, 45 minutes, depending on the lesson, is lengthy. So
Right,
they
it
take
is.
their lead from the students. And, it might be a little bit less than that, 30 minutes or so. But, generally the block is about 45 minutes instructionally in the elementary school.
So they're getting, because most of these are like 3 units and they're 15 days, so they're getting like 45 days somewhere in the year of social studies
Mhm.
for 45 minutes, half hour to 45 minutes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mr. Votto?
Yeah, that's just an issue that I have. I don't think there's enough time. But how do we, and I've said this before, and it's been an issue of mine, how do we make sure that teachers maintain that schedule? to make sure that they have enough time set aside for social studies?
Well, I mean, the
Do
building
teachers hand in lesson
principals.
plans?
Pardon?
Do they hand in lesson plans?
I don't know. I think that is dependent on the building.
Well, that's a must.
The building principals have primary responsibility for teachers in terms of how they, they set their schedules and what's expected. Obviously, people like me walk through classes to find out what's going on. Assuming all of this gets approved by you folks, we'll be piloting it starting after March 15th, after that full day PD when I present it to the teachers. And I'll be walking through classrooms at that point to figure out, are you devoting time to social studies? Are you working with what we've got? I would expect that that will happen again next year. That's just part of the same process that Carrie Laudadio or Christy Medancy would, there's not enough administrative time to guarantee that every teacher does everything exactly the way they're supposed to. You have to trust them to be professionals. Initially, when you're starting, there's a need to monitor things and help them out and get feedback and all of that. But at some point, they're teachers.
I realize
they
that,
got to do
Jim,
it.
but I also feel that it's a little more accountability if they're handing in lesson plans. That's number one. Number two, I really feel that, especially as a child enters 4th, 5th grade, I really think these two content areas, science and social studies, I think the time needs to be stepped up. Because now they're going to go to 6th grade in a middle school where they're getting a 70-minute class of science and social studies. That's a big jump from maybe having it 2 days a week for 45 minutes. Now you're going to have it every day.
You're not going to get an argument from me, but you might have a wrestling match with people in other disciplines.
Yeah, I know that, but I still feel the need to express myself with
Oh.
that. I just have an issue with that.
I
So
understand completely.
I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yep.
So at the beginning of the school year, each principal have the teachers create their instructional schedule. They're given the time guidelines for each content area so that when administrators are doing their walkthroughs or coordinators are doing their walkthroughs, they know what's happening in the classroom and they can see, when social studies is being taught, science, et cetera. In addition, as it relates to lesson plans, every teacher is required to have lesson plans out and visible so that when any administrator walks in the room, they would be able to see what's happening. That being said, everybody's lesson plan looks a little bit different. But, they are required to have them out and visible and,
They just don't have to hand them in.
correct.
Okay.
So, every building administrator, can ask teachers to view lesson plans whenever they want. But generally, as long as they're out and visible so that when an administrator's in the room, they can kind of see what's going on. In addition, we've asked every teacher to have their learning targets out on the board. So when you're through an elementary classroom, you'll see for each content area what the focus and the purpose of the lesson is for that day, for within the unit of study that they're teaching, so that it's very clear to an observer what's happening. And oftentimes, as well as they're talking with kids and they'll say what's going on and
Right.
what are you doing, they'll get that student feedback as well.
I know you mentioned presenting this at the next PD. Are these units that you're presenting, are they vastly different than the current units that they're teaching, or are they
There
just?
were no current units.
Gotcha.
At best, there were some course outlines.
Correct.
It's not that there wasn't a curriculum, but nothing this detailed or modern.
And the detail is unbelievable. I mean, there's a lot of work in that.
Yeah, I mentioned to some folks earlier today, I had a team of young and relatively inexperienced teachers for the most part who had never written curriculum, and they, it made them crazy to have to be out of classrooms in order to do the work, but they absolutely sank their teeth into it. I'm very proud of them, and I'm very proud of what they produced. I'm sure it'll be improved over the years, and that's appropriate, but considering that they started from so little.
Ms. Purcell?
I just kind of want to jump off of what Mr. Votto said about the time. And I know there's only so much time in the day, but the thing that also is, and we brought up in science, and I'm bringing it up again because it's still a concern for me, is that this is the one time slot kids can get pulled out of the classroom. whether it's for speech or for instrument or whatever it is, so that there are, or is there, what is in place for those kids that aren't there while this stuff is being done?
Well,
to catch them up?
I believe they actually have a separate time space.
So generally, the first opportunity for students to be pulled for related services, whether it's speech or special ed time or even step or instrumental music, is the enrichment and remediation time, which every school calls it a little something different, but it's the flex time. So that is the first go-to for any student with a need that's outside of the classroom. Social studies and science is used frequently as an alternative if none of that time works. So dependent on the student and how many times they have to be out of the room would dictate whether or not social studies or science is used. So from that lens, if they are missing some of that content, it's incumbent on, the teacher to find alternate times. It might be, when the child first comes in the morning to kind of catch up and review. It might be at a different time, during the lit block, if it's a social studies lesson that requires a written response or alternate reading or otherwise. So the teachers are used to making it work to ensure that the student is not missing out on the content of the lesson that they may have missed because they are out of the class. Similar to if they went home ill or they left school early or were absent or otherwise.
Okay, I understand that, but I'm going to say that it's nice that you have that enrichment period, but there's a lot of people who have a lot of load and they can't all pull at the same time. And so one of the things, and I'm just bringing this up, and I know it has nothing to do with whether we pass this or not, but I want to put the bug in the ear, is that sometimes students might be able to be pulled from something else, and I'm going to give you an example, like STEP students, for instance. STEP students tend to be very good in literacy, and so sometimes they're sitting in a situation where they're already above and beyond, and maybe could they get pulled. I'm just trying to say, don't
Right.
always use this as the alternative, because we're already
it's
limited
not.
with time.
We really do look at the needs of the students, and maybe 5-6 years ago, it was you could not be pulled out of anything other than ENR, and then social studies and science was your next layer. We have been more flexible with that in the last few years, but really in tune with whatever the needs of the child are. So it would really depend individually with each student when you're looking at it. Scheduling is very, very tricky at the elementary school. I mean, I know you know that.
Yep.
And the teachers work very collaboratively with special education, with instrumental music, with the STEP teacher to ensure that everybody is getting what they need, and it's as not disruptive to the student as much as we can. So it is not that if it doesn't fit in the ER time, it automatically goes to social studies and science. As I said, we're a little bit more flexible with that than we used to be. But it does happen. So, and generally we try to be as least disruptive as we can.
Yeah, it'll just be nice to see once we start checking mastery, if things are being mastered, I guess. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Votto?
Please indulge me, folks. You mentioned piloting. They're going to start piloting after the professional development day in March, you said?
Yes, sir.
Where are they going to start? What are they gonna
I'm
pilot?
going to let them freeform it and do
Okay.
their thing. I don't see that that there's a need to go in any rigid order. It doesn't work that way. And hopefully, my hope is that they pilot lots of different units in lots of different places, because that gives us more feedback.
But this stuff does match the curriculum outlines or whatever they have now, doesn't it, more or less? Right
Not
now?
always, because
Not
there
always.
are some changes
There are some,
in
okay.
the state framework. So,
Okay.
there will be teachers who, had their pet lessons in social studies
Oh,
that
yeah.
they like. They're not going to be able to do them anymore
that's
unless
sad.
they get shifted to another grade.
Right.
So there is some of that.
Yeah.
I think that's
All right.
something
Now-
that they sort of know this. The buzz has been going around.
Now, are you going to be, obviously you have some kind of feedback, you're going to get feedback from them at the
I
end of the
certainly
school
hope
year?
so, yeah.
And maybe tweak some of this if it needs to be tweaked, based on their piloting?
Well, that's a little bit delicate,
Okay.
because if we rewrite stuff in a unit, it's got to come back here
Right.
for approval. And I'm not likely to be here. Someone else will be handling that.
But the point is, at the end of the school year, teachers will be asked, what you piloted, what do you think?
I'm going to be
Yes.
asking him right on March
And that'll come
15th.
back to the curriculum group, not us.
Correct.
Yes.
First, right?
So most of what will take place is, lesson pacing, lesson resources, what was a good match, what wasn't a good
Right.
match. As it relates to the curriculum in general, the standards won't change. The unit, the
Right.
structure of the unit will not be changing. It would be the day-to-day flexibility of, oh gosh, this lesson took much longer than we
But
anticipated.
not content?
Not necessarily. It might be a resource that might be better suited to this particular lesson versus another resource. But as it aligns back to the standards, no.
All right.
So, as with any unit that we look, we bring it for approval and then we test run it to make certain that, the teachers are comfortable with the content, that the students are experiencing the content in the manner in which we want them to. And then, especially, over time, the resources themselves will continue to expand and align, and they'll find ones that they like better than others.
Will they have books, the kids?
No, there are, well, grade 3 has books because there's a specific Connecticut book,
Right.
which my fearless leader was able to find for me last year, and we bought it. The other grades do not have specific books. There's not a lot of specific stuff. We are looking at, last year before, I got pulled in by McGraw-Hill to evaluate some materials they were preparing for obviously publishing and sale. I gave them a bunch of feedback. I worked in Chicago for a few days with another, group of people. We're going to be piloting that stuff along with the new curriculum in 3 of the elementary schools. They're providing all the materials to us at no charge. And the teachers, they're also going to be doing a crosswalk to the unit, which means they get a copy of the curricular units and they say, here's what we have in that grade that matches what you're doing. So they'll be able to see if that's worth investing in and adopting at some point.
All right, so there is a possibility we'll get books then.
Yes,
Yes.
we're gonna provide materials in one form or another. I don't have a specific, here's my second grade,
Right.
textbook yet. But I've
there
already
are-
budgeted money.
Okay,
We're set to roll with that.
all right. One more question.
Sure.
Well, I'm taking, for instance, the grade 5, unit 1, and it gets to unit scoring criteria. I see that it's a performance task that they're going to be assessed on. In addition to that, will there be a traditional summative assessment?
Well,
Or is
a
that just-
performance
I don't
task,
see it in here, maybe I'm missing it.
a performance task is a summative
Well,
assessment.
not, all right.
And
okay.
I don't,
Is that the only assessment?
God, I hope not. It says in there, if you look, there's a blurb that says specifically, in addition to the performance task, because there's not one in every unit, in addition to the performance task, you should be formatively assessing all indicators in the unit
Which could be
throughout instruction.
throughout instruction, but what about the end of a unit?
Well,
that up to
again,
the teacher?
that's teacher,
That
if
teacher.
there's a performance task, then the task is the end summative assessment. If there's not, it's up to teachers to make decisions about what they're doing with that. That's why if you look at the units, I not only have all the social studies indicators in the scoring criteria, I've got the transferable skills in there too, because I want them to understand that assessing learning is a key part of being a teacher.
So there may be other projects or otherwise that a teacher will choose to do that aligns back to the social studies indicators or the transferable skills to show mastery of the content.
Just projects?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Again, at the elementary level, they are well-versed in providing a varied opportunity for kids based on learning style and need.
And if you look at the template in stage 3, which is the instructional component, It's the only part of a UBD unit where it's sort of voluntary. The teachers get to decide what they'll do and what they won't do. There's a list of possible assessments. They're called formative assessments, but it doesn't matter whether you call it formative or summative. It matters whether or not it matches the indicators that you're looking. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in there as examples of what they can do. You know, even the detail that you were citing before, that's where a lot of it came in. Just, and one other thing is a side note, there's a lot of resources in there, and anything that was an online resource, I picked and how do I say this? I exported it as a PDF and put it right on our website, because over the years I've seen lots of issues where good materials basically got lost because links got broken and people couldn't find them again. So wherever possible, that stuff is living on our servers.
Thank you.
I've noticed that some of the earlier units, they seem to overlap with our second step curriculum. Is that true? Is that purposeful? Because there's some time where we can kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, anytime that we can coordinate, we try to, especially, you know, social studies lends itself very nicely with English language arts. Same with science and math. So as much as we can overlap, we will. As much as we can connect to other things that we're doing, we do. And it does save us some time, but, you know, the elementary school day is never as long as we would like it.
Any other questions or comments about our social studies units? Okay, let's start with Mr. Votto.
Yes.
So, well, are we just going right through all of them, or are we just doing the?
Can we do them all?
Yeah, we're doing them all.
I would prefer to do them all.
Okay.
If that's okay with
Just-
everybody.
Just want to make sure
Yes.
everybody's clear. Yes.
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 Thank you very much. I
thank
appreciate
you.
your support.
Out of work there.
Like I said, I had a good team. I was very lucky, and I can't wait to email them and tell them that they've done a good job. It's official. Is there anything I can do for you before I leave? I'm
All
out
set.
of here. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Ready? Moving forward. Proposed adoption of the revised policy, animals in the school.
Okay, so on the agenda for this evening are quite a few policies, all of which are first reads. So I just want to be clear. The first one was our current policy, ING, which would be renumbered, and all of the shaded would be the things that we're adding. In recent years, there have been numerous requests for therapy dogs, for service animals to come into our buildings. And our policy that we had on file, ING, was very, very basic. Basically incorporated the first two lines of the policy that you see in front of us. So in looking at trying to update it to current times, because the last time it was revised was 1998, you'll see a lot of shaded additions that align with Connecticut law. This policy, model policy, was brought to us through CABE. So we tried to pick, the policy committee tried to pick pieces that we like, try to incorporate as much as we can, and that's what we have in front of us. Any questions or comments? You know, with the first read, that anyone can, tonight or otherwise, send me comments, questions. I don't like this sentence. Can you check this language out? Whatever, which is fine. And then if any adjustments are made at the second read, which is the February 19th Board of Ed meeting, I would bring to your attention any changes that were made.
When is our next meeting? 'Cause I would like to have, if anybody does have questions, I'd like to have them give it to us before our next meeting.
Correct.
When is, no,
Our
our
next-
next policy meeting.
Oh, our next,
It's
I'm
in-
not
what's-
sure.
What are we in, February? Is it?
I don't think we have one scheduled, do we?
I think we do.
It's we do have one in
Oh, we do?
February. You set up the invite for us.
right.
Oh,
I'll
yeah,
check.
thanks, Mike.
Well, then, be afraid of that invite.
He doesn't even know how he does it.
I'll check while we're chatting.
Ms. McKay?
Yeah, well, I
21st.
So that's after the second read.
Oh.
The 21st is our next policy
No, that's
committee.
fine.
That doesn't mean that we couldn't make adjustments, because the second read, given the February board meeting is earlier than it normally is, that board meeting is the 19th. Okay.
So, I can definitely see a need and a purpose for this. I want to make sure that people don't misinterpret. I mean, it's huge, the changes we're making.
Right.
So anecdotally, what do you think has been, say, in a given year, in the last 5 years? Because I think the whole notion of therapy animals have really gained in popularity, probably more so in the last, I don't know however many number of years you want to go back. But so anecdotally, how many do you think, just off the top of your head, because I suppose that could not only be for students, it could be for staff members. Do you think, can we handle, like, if you have potentially in one school, 5, 6 animals being introduced, and depending on the school and depending on the animals and depending on the situation, are we able to accommodate, that potential of need? And I don't know what our need is. That's why I use the word anecdotally. I don't want to hold you to
Right.
anything as a definitive number.
Therapy animals and service animals are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
So the policy that you have in front of you speaks a lot to the service animal
Okay,
piece.
which is going to be a stricter
Which is a
need.
stricter standard,
Yeah.
even for, how the animal is trained, what type of animal, et
Sure.
cetera. And, there are pretty strict guidelines as it relates to that. So this kind of goes through all of that. Therapy animals are slightly different in that it still goes under the consent of the building principal, in terms of allowing it in the building. So there's a little bit more leeway with that, unless it is a part of a student's, maybe a 504 plan or otherwise.
Yeah.
In which case, then there are stricter guidelines to
Yeah.
that. So we haven't had a tremendous, at least since I've been in this position, a
Mm-hmm.
tremendous amount of requests, but there are requests out there. So
Yeah.
we just wanted to make sure that we had a more specific policy in place instead of just the few lines that we had previously.
Right, oh yeah, that was it really inadequate when you
Correct.
look at what we had. But, I mean, again, would you say 98, so 11, like, you're looking at 10, 11 years ago
Yeah.
that it was updated. Yeah, I just want to, obviously I want our policy to be current and appropriate for our staff and for our students. But I just worry that, can we accommodate? I want to make sure we'll be able to accommodate. We'd have to, I guess.
Well, it's by law, isn't it?
Yeah,
We
it
have to.
is.
The
We'd have
service
to.
animal piece, yes.
The service,
Yeah.
right.
The therapy,
The
it
therapy
depends.
that's a little bit more gray, which, that's, okay, it's a little scary.
Costelli?
So I did talk with Carrie a little earlier today. After reading this again, one thing kind of stuck out to me. It's on page 3, the second paragraph, pretty much towards kind of in the middle. Such plan should include the reassignment of a person having custody and control of the dog service animal to a different classroom assignment. This is if someone in the class is allergic to the dog.
Right, that's another,
My question or my concern to Carrie was, why is it the student with the dog that is the one that's going to be reassigned? Why isn't it the student who's got the allergy? Or why don't we have the flexibility to, I don't want it to be in the
either or.
policy to say it has to be the kid with the dog.
Right, that's a good point.
that is a good
There should
point.
be a flexibility.
Right.
Is
I just
that
wanna see it more
how, is that
flexible.
how it's written, though, from a state law, that,
That's how it's written through the model policy. When I spoke with Kathy earlier, I said I would just touch base with our attorneys to determine what our options are as a school district in writing this policy. Do we have leeway to leave it more open-ended, to say, to be determined which party is moved? I don't want to make that judgment.
It's easier for certain kids to move than for others, so.
right,
That's
that's,
a good point.
yeah. To be able
It
to
would
do
be nice
case
to
by
have a
case.
little bit of flexibility, and also find out from their lens, you know, if no one wants to move, you know, what do you do at that point? You know, because you could have that situation as
sure.
well where,
Nobody wants to move.
right. So,
So that's something you're looking into?
I will
Karen?
look
Yeah,
into that,
okay.
yes.
Ms. Levesque?
I'm referencing the regulation that goes along with the policy. And on page 5 of the regulation, it indicates that when the district approves the use of a service animal, the building principal or designee will take the following steps. Educate students and staff on proper behavior around a service animal. Now, how will that be done?
Well, I would say personally, and this is my opinion, because I think you do have to leave it open-ended. Like when it
Be the
comes to the
designee.
staff, it could be through a faculty meeting. When you're talking about bringing a service animal into the classroom, before that animal comes into the classroom, you'd talk to the students. I would hate to be very prescriptive in exactly how to do it because it depends on the age of the children. It
Right.
depends on the classroom itself, you know.
I
but-
just would want to know if there's some kind of, just to make,
Protocol?
right, protocol, just to make sure that perhaps if this is the first time that a principal is encountering this experience, that they're imparting the right information.
Yep.
So, I don't know if there would be some kind of a handout or an age-appropriate type of a thing, if someone is visually impaired and is bringing a service animal with them as a student, and to kind of educate the other second grade students in that classroom about, this is a service animal, it's not a pet.
Correct.
You're expected not to be petting the animal or distracting it in any way because it's there to provide help for that particular student, so.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, you want to move forward?
Yep.
Use of tobacco and substitute devices.
Okay, so this policy was approved back in 2013 and has been modified to include a lot of the things that we're now seeing in terms of vaping, vapor product, jewels, et cetera. So we updated the use of tobacco and substitute devices to include some of the more current things that are out and about on the streets. So the strikeouts are what we're taking out. The shade is what we're putting in. And again, this model policy was revised through the use of our services with CABE.
Any questions? Okay, you want to move on? Drug and alcohol testing for drivers of school buses?
So this particular policy, last adopted in 2012, came across as a recommendation from CABE to change actually very little in what we had. Misuse to use and including just a few, detailed words at the first paragraph. But the second paragraph, they recommended putting in training as it relates to signs and symptoms of anaphylaxis and EpiPen use, which we had a conversation at policy committee, how we really didn't see how it fit into drug and alcohol testing for drivers of school buses. It really doesn't. However, again, we felt it was, since this was recommended as one of the mandatory changes to this policy through our policy service, we felt it couldn't hurt to have it in two places. If you recall, the policy that just went up for last month at this meeting, the administration of medication to students had the same paragraph in it, so it would live in two places. So we brought this one forward just as a quick adjust.
Ms. Raccio?
I know the school has the ability through, I don't know if it's a program with the drug manufacturers or a grant, to get free EpiPens. Is there anything available for school bus for the school bus
I
company
don't
to
know,
have
I can check
EpiPens?
that. I'll ask Kathy Nealon, the nurse coordinator, to see if she is aware of anything, you know, in terms of the transportation. And would it be the school system providing that, or would it be the
That's a good question,
transportation,
actually.
you
Because
know,
we don't,
system?
I mean, for some of the little kids, they don't carry an EpiPen around with them. They have to, the parents have to bring it in, sign it into the nurse,
Correct.
and that's where it stays. So
Yep.
if there's a way to get free EpiPens after the training, that'd be great.
Yep, I will ask.
Mr. Purcell?
So you're saying that the policy committee didn't really see why it's here, but you just did it because it came? Because I don't really see why it's here either.
It was a recommendation for it to be included in this policy. As we sat through policy committee, I'll be honest, all of us said the same thing. Like, you know, again,
We could take it out if we
you
so
could if you
choose.
wanted to. You know, it is one of those things that I don't think it hurts being in both places, but the connection there was a little bit of a stretch for us, yes.
I don't think it hurts.
That's kind of where we landed, like,
I don't
to
know
be,
enough about
to be
policies
honest, we
now,
landed
but-
all, well, it couldn't hurt, and so that's why.
Ms. Levesque?
Can you adjust the title of the policy to include that paragraph?
Drug, alcohol testing and training, maybe, for school
Right,
bus
I
drivers?
mean,
could.
perhaps that would be a little more palatable.
Ms. McKay?
So, I mean, I understand your point, Carrie, about it doesn't hurt to have it in, I mean, I don't really have a problem with it being here, you know, I don't really matter one way or the other, but it does put an expectation on the school transportation carrier to do this education, so.
They're required to by state law.
So they're doing it already?
They have to.
Okay, that's where I was gonna go with
Yes.
that. Okay,
Ms.
thanks.
Levesque?
As a follow-up question to that, if this is, how is that bus driver aware of which students require this intervention?
You know, to be honest, I believe the training gives them the training for any student who might experience an anaphylactic reaction. Because, as you know, food allergies may go undiagnosed until an exposure occurs. So while I do not believe in the state statute, it states they need to know specific children, they need to know any signs of an allergic reaction so that if a child, God forbid, got stung by a bee on the school bus or ate that snack that didn't belong to them and had an allergic reaction,
Right.
it wouldn't matter. They would recognize the signs and then know what to do when they see one of their students experiencing those symptoms.
So will our school nurse in some way, how do we assure?
We are not responsible as a
Right.
school system
Right,
to
but they're-
provide that training.
Right,
The
but-
transportation company themselves are responsible to provide that training through their own devices. Like Kathy Nealon, our nurse coordinator, would not be going over to our
Right.
bus company.
But how do we assure, I mean, because we're contracting with that bus
Yep.
company, and they're going to be doing this potentially for our
Yep.
students. How do we assure ourselves that that's an adequate training for them when our students are on that vehicle?
I understand.
Well, I would imagine that whatever training they have to go through has to be state sanctioned, that, you know, a certificate
wondering.
is.
Right.
A certificate is
I will find out the answer
earned.
If
to
you could
that.
find that
Because
out.
it's either through providing evidence of.
Right.
Or, you know, this is what the state is providing in terms of the protocol for. Given we contract out, I will find out what we will need to do to show that they've experienced that training.
Right,
It might be outlined in the contract.
Could be.
right.
It is new, so, you know, it is something, yeah.
So, oh, go ahead, Ms. Purcell.
No, just one more question on training. Obviously, they probably do it in summer before, but when they change bus drivers, is there a certain limit of time that they have to train the next?
Like once a year or something?
I will ask. I would imagine that when they're hired, similar to when we hire staff, we train before they start. I would imagine that occurs as well, but we can look at either our contract or what their practices are to ensure that that's happening. Good questions.
Anybody else? Okay, moving forward. Student conduct and deletion of policy, JG, student discipline.
Okay, so this, E and F, we have had several policies as it relates to student conduct and student discipline that are all from the late 90s. And we have updated policies that we've done within the last 5 or 6 years. And there's multiple policies that relate to conduct and discipline. So in looking at the proposed deletion of policy JFC and JG, that is because the adoption of the next one, student discipline, incorporates those two. We also currently have a policy, 5114, that just deals with suspension and expulsion. And so what we're trying to do as a policy committee is streamline our policies so that we don't have 6 different policies that are all centered around the same thing. It might be a very large, very meaty, very dense policy, but it's one that you can point all questions and seek information from just the one. So when we have on this the deletion of student conduct and student discipline, you see that they're very simple policies. So that's the deletion one. Do you have a question about
Ms.
that?
Novak?
I'm just looking at the proposed adoption of the regulation. Is that a separate policy that we're adopting the regulation for, not these?
So based on the conversation we had just as this meeting was starting, I went on and I looked. And what you see in front of you shouldn't be listed as a regulation, it should be the policy.
Okay.
So I'm sorry for that. That is
No,
a
that's
mix-up on our
just a
office's part.
yeah, I just wasn't
Take the
sure.
letter off.
Okay.
And it should be just policy 5131, student discipline.
Okay.
That will take the place of JFC and JG at this time.
Good, that clarifies it, because I was.
Sorry.
No, it's a lot of things to go through.
Once these are approved, are these policies that go in student handbooks?
They will be, yes. So they'll enter, and part of the reason why it's good that we're doing it this early is because as the high schools and middle schools start to look at their policy changes for next year, their handbook changes rather for next year, these are the things that we really need to have approved through the 3 reads so that they can get started on that. High school starts much earlier than middle school and elementary school in terms of getting the text and the content ready for their handbooks. And the first read for this student discipline 5131 is from Shipman Goodwin. So this is the model policy for student discipline that incorporates any changes to legislation that have occurred, and it's their recommendation for all of the text, which I know it's very long.
Anybody else?
The only other question I had on this particular policy was, I noticed that this, I don't recall this ever being presented before. Maybe it was, and I don't recall. But on page 13, Roman numeral 8, letter B, number 2.
Wait, can you say that again one more time?
Sorry,
please? Sorry.
page 13,
Yep,
Roman numeral 8,
yep.
letter B, number 2. I'm used to an expulsion hearing involving board members, and so this was the first time I had ever seen. Alternatively, the board may appoint an impartial hearing board. I'm just wondering, I've never seen that before, and to have it in policy, I'm wondering what would the occasion be for that, and who would be on that appointed panel?
Okay.
Where is that again, Kelly?
Page 13.
Roman numeral 8. B.
2.
Is that the stipulated agreement?
That's what I was thinking.
No, this is something else. No, stipulated agreement is completely covered in other
So
areas.
your question would be, what may be the occasion that that would take place?
Right, because
And
I've
then
never seen
who would
that.
be on such panel?
Exactly.
So is that just a generic term where, I mean, some districts, Board of Eds don't do expulsion hearings, but they actually have a hearing board that does that, especially in urban communities. Maybe it's just a broad terminology to cover whatever a community chooses to approach it.
Right.
It could be.
I
I mean,
don't
and
know.
it does say the board may appoint, so
Right.
you
Right.
would be the ones to
Appointing.
say,
Right.
you know what, we're gonna appoint this
Right.
impartial board,
But
but,
since it was recommended, I'm curious to
Okay.
know under what circumstances would that occur, and, because I've never seen it before.
okay. So as stated earlier, you know, I know that it's a lot to go through, but as you have questions that come up, if you want to just page number, Roman, you know, whatever, let me know. And I will either find out the answers and then bring it back to policy committee or have answers for you at the next board meeting.
Thank you.
One more quick
Yeah.
question, just to
Sure.
clarify, this policy 5131 comes from Shipman and Goodwin?
Yes, it does.
Any other questions? Public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.